Little did that guy know last season would be fucking terrible. Little did this hopeful guy know that he was in for one of the worst seasons in the entire 15-year playoff drought, up there with the tanking Adam Gase season that failed because we beat the Rams and Browns in back-to-back weeks for no reason. Little did this guy know that mid-season at the trade deadline, we would be so bad that we would trade Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams, two of our best players, period. Little did this guy know that in the month of December, we would have the worst point differential in December in NFL history. Little did this guy know that we would go the entire NFL season without a single interception, the first time that has ever happened in NFL history. Little did this guy know that we would have 4 takeaways the entire NFL season, the fewest by an NFL team in 100 years. And the only other team that is even with us in 1934 played 3 games the entire season. Little did this guy know that by the time we got to week 17, we would have Brady Cook in at quarterback because Justin Fields was benched by week 9. Little did this guy know we'd have Brady Cook at quarterback throwing to number 1 receiver John Mechie as we're getting our ass blasted 42 to something at home to the Patriots, our rivals going to the Super Bowl. Little did this guy know. Oh yeah, and I also forgot to mention this game against the Falcons right here, the last win for the Jets last season, where if the Falcons don't 3-and-out multiple times over the last 2 minutes of that game, and Nick Folk doesn't hit a game-winning 55-yarder at the buzzer, the Jets end up with the number 1 pick, which means we failed the tank just like we did in 2020. And oh yeah, just a sidebar, that game cost the Falcons the NFC South as well. So it was just bad on all fronts for both teams. But enough ranting about the perils of last season, it's time to turn the page. And unbiasedly, there are plenty of reasons for cautious optimism for the Jets entering this season and looking ahead to the future. But to be quite honest with you, I feel relatively numb entering this season despite the places to have hope, because it kind of goes back to my preview last season with the Jets, where one of the reasons I felt hopeful enough to title the video what I titled it is because there was something different about the Jets entering that season, the first year under Aaron Glenn, and that's the fact that for the first time in a very long time, the Jets had found and developed high-end talent in the first round, and they rewarded it by signing these guys and retaining them with long-term second contracts. That's something they did not do much of at all in the 2010s. And 2 of those guys were Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams spearheading the defense. And obviously the Jets had to trade both of those guys last season. Now, I'm not frustrated at all about the return that we got for each of them. In fact, I'm delighted. 3 firsts and a second is a great haul for the 2 of them. And I'm not mad either about the decision to trade those guys given the position that we were in. What frustrates me is the fact that we put ourselves in this position where it was in our best interest to trade this homegrown talent. And what makes me feel numbed is the fact that this is not an unfamiliar position for the Jets. Just 5 years ago, the Jets entered 2021 on the verge of making 5 first-round picks over the span of 2 seasons. And overall, the Jets drafted pretty well during that time. They drafted a relatively solid O-lineman in Elijah Vera-Tucker, who just couldn't stay healthy enough, a solid edge rusher in Jermaine Johnson, and an all-pro corner in Sauce Gardner, and an all-pro receiver in Garrett Wilson. But unfortunately, they drafted Zach Wilson to be the quarterback, and it ultimately led to the demise of all of that optimism for the Jets that was created by that draft capital and the guys they drafted. So much so that we just traded one of them to create this identical situation now. Now, to be honest, I can't give you strong reason proving to you why this time around the rebuild with all of this draft capital will end up with a different result, other than hope and trust in Darren Maui leading the front office to figure it out, which, to be fair, I have a good amount of trust in this man, given what he's done to transform the team and put ourselves in this position since last April. And to be honest, where we are entering the 2026 season from a roster standpoint is pretty intriguing. I mean, just look at the offense. In terms of supporting cast, this is one of the more intriguing Jets offenses this decade in that regard. I mean, Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson have been around and they're quality talents, but this year they're supported by Kenyon Sadiq, first round pick this year at tight end, Mason Taylor, second round pick last year at tight end, Omar Cooper Jr., first round pick this year to come opposite Garrett Wilson, A.D. Mitchell coming off an interesting flash of talent over the back half of last season. Two tackles in Armand Membo and Olu Fashanu, who they drafted and spent high first round draft capital on the past couple of seasons, who've both turned out to be very solid tackles in their own rights. At all of the main spots in an offensive supporting cast, the Jets either have high end talent or high end potential. And not a lot of offenses can say that across all of these positions. There's just two bones to pick. One is the interior offensive line, which lost both of its starting guards from last season in John Simpson and Elijah Vera Tucker. Now, I do think the Jets can be serviceable in that regard, sliding Joe Tippmann to right guard, putting Josh Myers in at center, and then they signed Dylan Parham to play left guard from the Raiders in the offseason, who was solid enough last season in Vegas. And then the other bone to pick is obvious. It's a bone that's been picked with the Jets offense for a long time now, and that's the quarterback. This time around, it's an old friend, Geno Smith. Now, obviously, Geno Smith was he was bad last season. Really bad. Raiders fans will be the first to tell you about that. But to cut him a bit of slack, that situation was not ideal for any quarterback to thrive in. The Raiders were a mess last season. It was dysfunction under Pete Carroll in his lone season at the helm. There was a reason he was fired immediately after that last game. And as a result, that showed in the offense. Brennan Carroll was the offensive line coach, and I don't know what he was doing, but that O-line for the Raiders was a mess. Just ask Ashton Genty and his yards before contact metric. And then in terms of the skill positions, at wide receiver, the Raiders traded Jacoby Myers, their number one receiver, in week 4 to the Jaguars. And from that point forward, it was Trey Tucker as the Raiders' number one receiver. It was basically Brock Bowers at tight end and then a bunch of Whoville besides Aston Genty in the backfield, who anyway struggled to alleviate the pressure from Geno or whoever quarterback was coming in at the time, given the struggles of the offensive line. So now Geno Smith is going from that to a situation where you have high-end talent across the skill positions or potential, going from Garrett Wilson to the potential of Omar Cooper, going from Brees Hall to the potential of Kenyon Sadiq, and a relatively solid O-line and a relatively healthy O-line from last season. I guess that's unlikely to stay that way, but you have two promising tackles in Fashanu and Membo. Like, there is room here for Geno Smith in the right situation to succeed. But a large part of that will also depend on the offensive coordinator, because the Jets have a new one. They let go of Tanner Engstrand after last season, which I think is a bit harsh, because I don't know if Tanner Engstrand had a true chance to show his skills given the quarterback struggles with Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor, and Brady Cook last season. But they went for the veteran hire in Frank Reich, who has a lot of experience calling plays in this league, to mixed returns. Obviously, is the great years of Carson Wentz's MVP season, his first year in Indianapolis, but he also has some down years, like his last 2 seasons as a play caller in 2022 with Matt Ryan and the Colts, and 2023 with the Panthers in his lone season there. So there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of where the Jets offense will fall on the scale this season, given the variability in Frank Reich-led offensive results and the season-to-season variance from Geno Smith over the last couple of seasons. But one thing is certain. Frank Reich has all the tools to work with to put Geno Smith in the best position to succeed. And Geno Smith has all the tools around him to work with to help him elevate and get back to his level of play when he was at his best in Seattle. And if those two things can happen, if Frank Reich and Geno Smith can have an upswing of a season, then there's no reason why the Jets can be at least a competent offense. And trust me, the bar is low. So just having a competent offense would be a very successful year and step in the right direction for the Jets. Now, transitioning to the defense, it is also in a relatively similar position. There's a lot of intrigue for growth, but it's also coming from a relatively low point. They obviously traded their two best players on that side of the ball in the middle of last season, and as a result, they fell to the second worst defense in the league, only better than the Dallas Cowboys in terms of defensive efficiency. And while the Cowboys had their offense to offset that, the Jets just did not, which is why they were as bad as they were. But the Jets have brought in some reinforcements to try and help with that. After Sauce left, the corner room was really thin. They brought in a Nashawn Wright who's coming off and up here with the Chicago Bears to be one of their top two corners. They made a trade with the Dolphins to bring in Minka Fitzpatrick to play safety, another spot where the Jets were relatively weak. And that opens the door for Andre Cisco to play in a more comfortable position, hopefully. They brought in another old friend on the defensive side of the ball. This one is Demario Davis. I loved Demario Davis back when he was a young Jet almost a decade ago. So he's going to hopefully be a great leader and veteran presence for this defense, calling all of the plays. And then on the D line, it's a bit of a reshape because Jermaine Johnson, another one of the first round picks from the original rebuild that the Jets did like this, he was shipped out of the door to Tennessee, and in his place, they bring in Tavondre Sweat, who I really like as an interior defensive lineman. I think there is potential there. That gets paired with Will McDonald, who has been the Jets' best pass rusher over the past couple of seasons. And it also gets paired with, of course, the number 2 pick in the NFL draft in David Bailey, where the ceiling is sky high. The Jets are hoping to have a truly bona fide elite pass rusher opposite Will McDonald to lead this Jets defense into this next era. They also brought in Kingsley Enagbare and Joseph Asai to take on the role of rotational pass rushers behind Bailey and McDonald. And then they still have Jamien Sherwood, one of the few mainstays remaining from this defense over the last couple of years, who will now be pairing with Demario Davis to create what should be a pretty damn solid linebacking duo. So the pieces are in place for the Jets defense to at least take a step back in the right direction this season after falling apart over the last 2 years. But just how much of a step forward it can be will be dependent on their new play caller, because just like offensive coordinator, they made a switch at defensive coordinator. But this time they went from an old play caller in Steve Wilks to a young play caller in Brian Duker, the former secondary coach with the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, it remains to be seen how good he can be as a play caller, but I think the Jets defense can at least take that step forward, and it remains to be seen how much it will be. I also quickly want to give a shout out to Chris Banjo and his special teams unit, because they were the best special teams unit of all time for a 3-14 team. I mean, this special teams unit was electric. There were periods of the season where special teams was the most explosive part of the Jets offense, which says maybe more about the Jets offense than the special teams, but still, that shows you just how good the special teams were. Isaiah Williams and Kene Nwangwu were exceptional returning the football last season, and while they probably won't be as insane last year, there's probably going to be some regression to the mean. Hopefully, with these guys still in place, Chris Banjo still in place, the Jets can still get some high impact plays from that special teams unit. Overall, I do think the Jets should be better this season, although that's not saying much because they were below the screen last season. But their schedule has opportunities for wins. They should be favored against the Browns at home, Dolphins at home, Raiders at home. They have a winnable game against the Cardinals, winnable game against the Vikings at home. Titans in week 1 is also winnable. I mean, outside of that, the rest of the schedule is tough. NFC North, AFC West, their Patriots and Bills in their division too. So it could be tough sledding for most of the schedule, which is why I'm not going to say anything crazy like the Jets are going to be competing for a playoff spot, but that's not what I'm looking for out of the Jets this season. I'm just looking for a step in the right direction. And the talent is there for that. But the question is the quarterback there for that? And is the coaching there for that? And with respect to the latter, we've talked about the 2 coordinators, but it all starts with Aaron Glenn, because this is it for him. He is fortunate in this era of the NFL to be having a second year coaching, given just how bad the Jets looked on the field last season. But he was granted a second chance. He was granted the ability to hire a new offensive coordinator and a new defensive coordinator. And he was granted a chance to take part of this first draft where the Jets had 3 first-round picks and plenty of capital to build out this team throughout the offseason. So it's now or never, because if the Jets don't show a significant enough leap, he's going to be out of there too. As you can probably tell, I don't have a quantitative goal for this season. I just want to look like a competent football team. Is that too much to ask for? If it is, at least I can look forward to hopefully being in a very strong position with our 3 firsts again next year to draft our quarterback of the future.